De Balie staat voor mij voor zelfontwikkeling.
De Balie staat voor mij voor het vrije woord.
Voor het gesprek.
Friends, family,
history, physics, math.
De randjes opzoeken.
A combination of ultimate freedom of speech.
En waar niets taboe is of zou moeten zijn.
Een plek vol creativiteit.
Waar beeldende kunst, literatuur en nog veel meer disciplines samengaan.
Een plek vol kansen.
Een goed gesprek is een gevaarlijk gesprek. Het moet eng zijn, het moet iets op het spel staan.
Maar toch elkaar proberen te begrijpen.
And it may make you think before you answer.
Want met je vrienden ben je het altijd eens, maar hier leer je nog eens wat.
Met elkaar in gesprek blijven gaan is essentieel omdat het alternatief voor spreken geweld is.
Discussie moet je niet onder een draadje doen op Instagram. Dat is niet de plek. Hier is de plek.
Het was mijn eerste plek waar ik documentaire leerde kennen en andere media ook leerde kennen.
Hier, deze plek. Daar zat Adel uit Rozen.
En er zaten een stuk of 10 regisseurs in Burger in de zaal.
Daar heb ik haar voor het eerst ontmoet.
En een van die regisseurs had gezegd, voor je begint moet je aan het publiek zeggen, als u overgaat tot geweld wordt u gearresteerd. En ik was nog nooit zo'n keurige bijeenkomst.
En it changed my life.
There's only one place like that, and it's the Balie.
Het maakte de avond merkwaardig, op zo'n manier dat ik niet snel vergeten ben.
Welcome at tonight's venue at the Balie. At first, very much welcome here, the audience. Thank you for being here, and also the audience at home at the live stream. My name is Leonard Boy. I'm the co-moderator of tonight's debate about Palantir. Inside Palantir, we will give you a lot of insights, have a lot of distinguished guests. As you've maybe noticed, this is a live stream, but we also ask you kindly not to take photographs, not to film if that's not allowed. It's also, as you have seen, a secured event. And please, will you put your phones on the steel stand? That would be very nice. Again, a very warm welcome here at the Balie, and also welcome our moderator and program maker, Rosalie Dielis.
Thank you so much, Leonard. Good evening and welcome. So happy to see so many familiar faces to Techdenkers, the series that's made possible by Agen together with the Balie, where we examine the influence of technology on our democracy. My name is Rosalie Dielissen and I'm the tech journalist. And tonight we will look inside Palantir, a company named after the magical seeing stones from Lord of the Rings, develops software that can link, analyze, and visualize enormous amounts of data. The company supplies armies, intelligence agencies, and police services, from Ukrainian military to help hold back the Russians to the US Immigration Enforcement Agency, ICE. The Netherlands has also been using Palantir technology for years, largely outside public view, according to research by Follow the Money. The Dutch military has worked with Palantir since 2010, and the National Police uses the software as a core of its data platform for combating serious crime. This use raises fundamental questions. How transparent are these systems? Who oversees the algorithms? What safeguards exist against errors, bias, or wrongful suspicion? And what does that mean for our digital sovereignty? We understand that there might be some skepticism about the company Palantir. We, however, believe that questioning those in power critically is one of our core responsibilities. Palantir Technologies is no exception. We are therefore pleased that a representative, Richard Evans, will be present at the Balie to engage in a discussion on current and pressing issues, including the deployment of their surveillance technology and its use in the Netherlands. Afterwards, we will have a panel about the importance of digital sovereignty with Jochem de Groot and Ellen Mok. And lastly, Evans will come back to the table for a follow-up. At the end of the program, there will be time for questions. I will now give back the words to my colleague Leonard, who will be moderating the discussion with me.
Rosalie, thank you so much. We start with a small questionnaire on our two distinguished guests later on in the panel. Ellen Mok, you're the founder of Digitale Doetank, a mission-driven advisory firm focused on digital sovereignty and the strategic use of emerging technologies. but you also have a background in cyber strategy and national security, and you used to work previously for the AIVD as a cybersecurity advisor and researcher. And next to you is Jochem de Groot, Director of Policy at NL Digital, the trade association of the Dutch digital sector. And you wrote a book, Kolonisten van de Cloud, The Colonists of the Cloud, about the geopolitical role of tech companies. And you're connected to the Advisory Council of International Affairs and the Netherlands Atlantic Association. Let's start.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to add a critical voice to this panel, which, as it looks...
Make a question then, please. Make a question then, please.
No, I'm sorry.
No, then I ask you to sit down. Then I ask you to sit down. Okay. Make your question. Make your question.
Sorry, but I need to raise my voice.
Please sit down. If you cannot make your question, I ask you kindly to sit down.
There is no question.
Well, then please sit down.
About the fact that you do not invite speakers that represent...
You didn't give him the opportunity to ask any question or have any answer already. So what's the point? Please sit down.
Maybe to raise the voice.
You can raise your voice after there's the questionnaire moment of the program, and you can also ask questions, but make a question.
Do not worry about it.
Okay.
So the way that you have organized this makes it a commercial talk, right? So he knows the situation.
Can you please sit down?
There is no denial. In fact, when Palantir was asked...
I ask you now politely for the third time to stop, and otherwise we will ask you to leave.
Indeed.
Okay. Kunnen wij... ja.
The company Palantir, which has been listed as complicit in genocide, I am sorry, but there need to be critical voices in what appear to be no debate whatsoever, but the fact that consultants are very gladly talking about. Except you didn't invite any critical voices to this panel, so I must make myself hear as much as I can, in particular because Palantir is involved in the genocide in Gaza, has been listed by the UN Special Rapporteur, and it's supporting ICE fascism everywhere. Fuck you, Palantir!
Okay, I hope everybody can take its place and we restart the program. Thank you so much. Ja, prima. Ja. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention again? Thank you so much. As already told, we will have a debate with our panelists. We will have an interview with the representative of Palantir, and you have the possibility to ask questions on the last part of this venue. But also, if you think that's important to make a straight remark, which is a question, we will come with you with the microphone. But to make statements like this without having even heard our panelists, I think it's a lack of time. So we go back to Ellen. I was asking you, what is at stake tonight, according to you? What is the most important thing for you?
That's actually a good question and, well, straight to the point. So for me, I think if I have to state one or two things, I think the most important thing for me is that we are super critical of some of the companies that our government currently employs or sales or hires. So we need to be super critical because it's our taxpayers' money that we maybe fund some companies or people with that we that don't share the values that we have. And what I find super important is that we also not only talk about Palantir, which is not just one company, but also really talk about, do we need companies in our military? Do we really need companies in the room while we're at war, either aggressive or, well, I would say only defensive, but do we really need companies like Palantir shaping how we defend ourselves, shaping how war looks like, and making decisions and giving us also power to make decisions that we as people maybe don't want?
Okay, thank you so much. Jochem de Groot, also for you, what do you think is something you're curious about? What do you want to know from Palantir?
Well, what fascinates me about this company is that much more than other companies, it has ideology at the base of what it does, right? Many of these companies are market capitalism driven by shareholder value, and so is Palantir. Certainly they're very successful in that sense, but they're also driven by certain ideology and look on the world.
Yeah, you brought this book.
Their CEO, Alex Carr, wrote this book, The Technological Republic, which is kind of like an ideological foundation, which intrigued me very much ahead of this debate. And the mix of ideology together with market capitalism as well as geopolitics is a mix that's quite unique and is really worth diving into.
Okay, so you're saying it's not only a money-driven company, but also a very ideological-driven company, and the ideological ideas behind that have to be questioned. And you also point out that we have to question the fact that the company as such is being part of a government, especially in a state of war, and what does that mean for the voice of people and taxpayers' money. Well, let's see if we can find that out in the following talk we will have, the following interview. You will be here, and you also will join the panel later on. Thank you so much, and back to Rosalie.
Thank you so much. Well, let's go to the first part of the evening, where we'll interview Richard Evans. I'm going to introduce you. You're a member of Palantir's Privacy and Civil Liberties Engineering team, based in London. You've worked across Palantir's UK defense, UK healthcare, and international public sector business since joining the company in 2017. And you were previously a lawyer in the New Zealand government, focused on public and constitutional law. Welcome. Thank you for being here. Well, let's address the elephant in the room, right? I mean, what just happened? There's been quite some criticism about Palantir. We've had some criticism on inviting you, especially concerning your ties with Israel, but also what happened in Iran, also your work with ICE. How do you react to that?
Well, I won't say it's pleasant. It's not pleasant being unpopular in certain circles, but I also think about the deep partnerships that we've long had with institutions across Europe. So we're not some kind of newfangled new entrant to Europe. We've worked across the continent for over 15 years. We're partners to many of Europe's most critical institutions, not just in defense and national security and law enforcement, but also in the private sector. I think of our work with Airbus. I think of our work with companies like Stellantis and others. And so, yes, I recognise the intensity of feeling that it can exist around the company, but on a day-to-day basis, I'm surrounded by engineers in London who are doing incredible work and delivering really great outcomes for public services in the UK, just as colleagues across Europe are doing the same. So I think that's what anchors you. That's kind of what determines how you think about your work. And
you don't have a debate on the lunch table about your impact in the rest of the world?
We have intense debates internally.
Yeah. And what's the debate about?
Debates?
We have debates at the level of individual engagements, at the level of everything from there to the level of geopolitics. I would say that most of the work we do, I think all Palantirians would be unequivocally proud of, but there are always engagements that different Palantirians will have different views on, and I don't think you could run a company like Palantir working in these interesting, complex places if it was an ideological monolith. So you'll find a spectrum of views, but I think what we all have in common... But
ideological monolith, what do you mean by that?
I guess my point is that the company's not an ideological monolith. You find a spectrum of views.
Some people think genocide is just fine within the company.
But I think what we all have in common is a commitment to working with public institutions on important issues, even when they are complex and controversial.
Yeah, but you said you don't have an ideology, but if we listen to your CEO, Alex Karp, he does say there's some kind of ideology behind you, and that's especially that the West is superior.
So the ideology is just as I put it, that there's a commitment to working to ensuring that we're providing public institutions with technology that supports them to be more effective and more responsible in how they use data. That is what kind of holds the company together. And there's a belief that we should lean into the challenges that these institutions face, abstaining from working in public services. Even
Do you agree upon this idea that the West should be superior?
I don't think we should take Western institutions for granted. They are worth defending, and in the world as it is, rather than as we would want it to be, that requires, for example, military capability. It requires national security capability, and I think that's the world as it is.
So you have to say there's something to fight for.
Yes.
Yeah, but if you look at the partners that you are paired up with, which are mostly governments, military, police, it does mean that you're an extension, or at least work together with governments that do believe that using your technology in a way, causes harm.
I mean, can you provide an example of that? It's hard to engage with abstractions.
Well, if you, for instance, look at ICE.
Let's talk about...
Thank you.
Intelligence company and not...
Thank you.
Yes.
We tried to do the questionnaire. You can have your moment as well.
Can you answer regarding Palestine at least?
We are referring, for example, to ICE.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that? Because that's, I think, one of the clearest examples.
So I think our work with ICE is an example of the way in which we partner with public institutions that are working in difficult spaces where you are weighing up where public institutions are weighing up different human rights and societal imperatives. We started working with the Department of Homeland Security under the Obama administration. That work continued under the Obama, first Trump, Biden, second Trump administration. It's work that we do with an institution that's subject to the rule of law, which has a democratic mandate, and which is performing an essential public function. I think the ideology that would be troubling is if a technology supplier to the federal government was going hot and cold on its customer based on the politics of the day and based on who's in charge. I think that would take you more to a form of kind of techno-authoritarianism. We don't support.
So are you suggesting that they wrongly use your technology? That they just don't understand what they're doing with your technology?
No, that's not what I said. What I said is that we're proud to support the Department for Homeland Security. We're proud to provide our technology to them as they perform an important public function, subject to the rule of law within the framework of the US Constitution.
Can you please stop? Can you please stop interfering?
We will go house by house with absolute immunity.
Oké, ik ga je nu vragen te stoppen.
We will go house by house with absolute immunity. That is their term.
Ik ga je voor de derde keer vragen nu stil te zijn. Als u dat niet doet, dan vraag ik u ook de zaal te verlaten. Serieus. Geldt ook voor u, mevrouw.
Point is made. Thank you.
Oké, thank you.
Thank you.
Ja.
At least respond to the questions.
Rosalie.
Could you answer the question that we follow?
So, can you ask the question again?
I was asking if you were referring to we work simply for under the law of the Constitution. Something has changed in the last governmental area of Trump, for example. Are you still aligned with that, do you think?
So, on immigration specifically, I understand that Europeans have concerns about US immigration policy, but the facts are, as I outlined them, we've worked with the Department for Homeland Security over many years under multiple kind of administrations. We don't partner with political persuasions. We partner with institutions as a software company that provides software.
But doesn't that mean that you have sometimes to reflect upon that policy? What does it mean for people's positions? What does it mean for what's happening underground?
So I think
it's your software.
It is our software, and there are different layers of agency at play here. So as an individual, I choose to work at Palantir. That's an act of choice that I'm responsible for. I choose to work at Palantir because as a company, we choose to work with public institutions that operate in really important, even if complex and controversial spaces. I don't think, and we have agency to do that, and we have agency over the technology that we build that supports our customers. And often that technology is what's helping them push out the trade-offs between these different human rights and societal
What do you
imperatives.
mean with supports our customers?
But that agency that we have as a software company doesn't extend to dictating the political policy of the day. That sits with elected representatives and elected institutions. Put it this way, if a tech company in the Netherlands decided to effectively veto or go hot and cold on the Dutch government based on the politics of the day, I describe that as tyranny by tech, bro. That's not the game that we're in.
So you want to be loyal?
We're loyal to public institutions within a constitutional framework. And frankly, most software companies, most technology suppliers operate in the same way. What I'm describing here isn't particular to Palantir. We just need to kind of keep that in perspective.
Okay.
But okay, take us to that, because you keep saying we're just a software company. So explain to us, what does a software, or what do you exactly do?
Sure. So we make software platforms that our customers use to bring together, govern and use their data in support of better decision making and operations. So to kind of tease out what that means in practice, if you take, for example, a hospital that, among other things, is carrying out surgical operations, the data required to make that operation happen lies scattered across lots of different systems. So you'll have rostering information about the availability of nurses and doctors in one system. You'll have inventory management systems with information about the required material. You'll have electronic patient records with highly sensitive patient data. Our software helps, for example, the hospital bring that data together so that all of those components are ready to go to ensure that the operation happens, to ensure that the patient receives care, and to ensure that any given individual is only seeing the data that they're authorized to see. So the supply chain team shouldn't be seeing the patient record data.
But do you have insight into that data?
So Palantir's role is as a software company. In data protection terms, we're a data processor, with our customers always remaining in full control of the data and how it's processed in accordance with their legal and ethical obligations. So the only access that our engineers might have to patient data is extremely, or to customer data, is limited to where the customer needs technical support.
But are you then saying that the data is not stored anywhere? Within your servers or clouds?
The final point I'd make is that Palantir cannot use its customers' data for its own purposes.
Do you store them?
That's different, right? If you can't access it, but you can store it?
So there are different hosting arrangements. Sometimes customers might host their data in public cloud infrastructure, like Microsoft Azure or Microsoft or AWS, and you have an expert on the cloud sitting to my left. In the defense and national security world and law enforcement, they might use on-premises hosting, which means that the customer also manages the full hardware stack that the software is embedded on. But the main thing is that Palantir has no commercial interest, no legal ability to ever use its customers' data.
So you don't sell the data?
Purposes.
That's what you're saying?
That would be illegal, and we would lose our business if ever we were to do it.
Okay, but like, for instance, I already said this in my introduction, you work together with the Dutch government, with the military and with the police. What happens to that data? Is that data shared with the US, for instance? Because that's your main, because you're mostly tied to the US?
So unfortunately, I'm not authorized to talk about any work we might have in the Netherlands, but fundamental...
Why is that?
Why is that?
Yeah.
It's not for me to talk about our customers' work.
It's the government.
It's the government, and it's a standard part of any commercial arrangement with the technology suppliers or otherwise, that institutions have confidentiality obligations. I mean, to be clear, Palantir likes its customers talking about the work we do, and if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see copious numbers of customers, including public sector customers, talking about our work.
But that's quite difficult, isn't it? I mean, on one hand, you're saying we work with governments who are controlled, who are working along the law and so on, and on the other hand, we cannot hold the government accountable as soon as we don't know that, for example, you work for them.
I think it would be strange against the backdrop of a conversation about security and data governance if I was to start revealing secrets that aren't mine to tell, and if I was sharing data that I wasn't authorized to share.
Well, you can simply say, do you work for the Dutch government and the Dutch police?
You've seen various public reporting. I can't comment on any work that we might do in the Netherlands, and that confidentiality is a standard feature of commercial arrangements. And
so that's a yes.
There are legislative scrutiny mechanisms. I'm assuming the Netherlands has freedom of information legislation. You can pursue that.
But do you understand that the lack of transparency that people feel or civilians feel makes it that they question what Palantir does?
So I think your event blurb described us as kind of mysterious, and I want to push back a little bit on that. If you go to our website, you'll see copious information about our products. You'll see the full set of technical documentation for many of our products. As I said, on our YouTube channel, you'll see live product demonstrations of all of our capabilities. On our blog, you'll see a ton of policy material where we're setting our positions on different things. So I think critics are under an obligation to avail themselves of the information out there so that it advances the starting point for discussion.
But it does...
Let's have a question for Ellen, because we're talking specific about this topic, about the fact who is sort of in charge of telling the audience whether or not Palantir is working for Dutch government or police. How do you comment on that? What do you think about it?
Well, I have a couple of things here. So, as a former intelligence officer, although I'm critical on a lot of things I hear, I'm actually not allowed to say if I've worked with Palantir myself. So that's something I have to, that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
But what I also find interesting is that you refer to your website and that everything is on there. Because what's also on the website is Karp's promise to investors, where he specifically states that he as a company, or that Palantir as a company, wants to make sure that they hold our government accountable for what they do. So they literally state on their website that they aim to replace the role that our second chamber or parliament has currently. So even if you look on the website and you actually look at what's there, then even the unconstitutional thoughts also are there. So I find that a little bit, clashing with your claims of transparency.
So can you comment on that?
I'm not sure I understood the question. What's the statement you're referring to? Can you repeat
I don't have the website with me, but there is a clear promise to investors where Karp's actually, in the letter to investors, stating that he aims to control, hold governments accountable. Literally stating the word accountable, so that they, and also in lots of his
So you do the
YouTube
parliamentaries' work.
Exactly.
I'd need to see the full language and the.
Well, you know your website.
I was making a wider point that just pushing back on the notion that there isn't information out there. You made an earlier point though that I need to come back on. I think you asked if, by virtue of Palantir being an American company, the American government has access to data. That Dutch or other customers might use. I mean, the answer to that is unequivocally no, and I need to be really clear about that. The fundamental purpose of our software is to maximize the control that our customers have over their data. If we were somehow providing some form of backdoor, that would obviously be illegal, and it would destroy our business. So the answer to that is unequivocally no, and just wanted to be clear on that.
I think that's clear, but my question stemmed from the fact that Alex Karp, your founder and CEO, said that Palantir works together with the allies of the US. So when I read that, I wondered, what if Europe or the Netherlands no longer is an ally of the US? What happens to our work or the work that the police and the military does with Palantir?
Yeah, so I fully recognize that the transatlantic relationship is under strain, and for anyone who can recognize the central role that America's played in American security, in European security and European prosperity over many years, that's a real, that's really concerning. I don't really fancy myself as a geopolitical commentator, but I'd also point out that there's real structural depth in the relationship. There are reasons on both sides of the Atlantic to make the relationship work, and so, you know, we're just not contemplating kind of the kind of scenario that would put us in a difficult position.
If Trump pulls out of NATO, on whose side will Palantir be?
Again, that's
a very simple question.
So the
Can I add to this?
Palantir's, you know, I think Palantir.
You have been discussing this, of course. This is an internal strategy notice. This is clearly one of the questions which is on the table.
Yeah, and I would say Palantir is deeply committed to Europe. We have over a quarter of our workforce here. We've been trusted across the continent for over 15 years. We continue to be trusted. In fact, we're recently seeing a real upswing in the adoption of our technology, in particular by militaries. And on a day-to-day basis, at that kind of level where I see things, the relationship remains extremely functional and extremely strong.
So you're not pulling out?
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Jochen.
What I find extremely interesting is that on the one hand, this company decides to say, we define ourselves what allies are of the United States and what kind of military, police forces we support. So that's a decision made, right, by the leadership and extensively written in this book. And on the other hand, that you are indiscriminate towards the different governments that use the technology, and you don't make a difference there. So if you say we work for the Trump administration and the first ICE practices between 2016 and 2020, then the Biden administration had a whole different type of policy. We were indiscriminate towards supporting them with our technology. Now we're back. It's a paradox to say that on the one hand, we don't distinguish between the various governments that have completely different ideological focus and how they execute on policy, whilst at the same time you do pick and choose what kind of countries you decide you're going to provide your technology with, because you don't do it for China or for Russia.
Correct.
Okay. Can you comment on that?
You're absolutely right. Palantir has never worked in countries that you could consider adversarial to the West, broadly defined. We've never pursued work in China, never worked in Russia, never worked in Iran, You're right to say that, but I think we partner with institutions. We don't partner with political persuasions. And I'd be wary of a world in which tech companies were going hot and cold on elected officials based on the politics of the day.
But I worked for very large tech companies working globally, and what they did say is we have a kind of human rights impact assessment that we make for how our technology is being used, and based on the case-to-case basis, they will or will not provide the technology as such. That's not connected to saying, okay, we say and define this country to be an ally that we should support ideologically, and we're not going to look at how the impact of technology is going to work out in practice. That's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
So I think that's a valid point. I mean, Palantir is not a software company that just builds enterprise technology and throws it over a wall into the wild in the way that if you were at Microsoft or Salesforce or another tech company, you would. Whenever we take on new partners and whenever we deploy our software in new ways, that's always accompanied by a lot of thinking around the ethics of that, around the kind of human rights standards that complies with. And so we do a degree of that due diligence, but we also choose to work for the most part with, as an act of, as a choice to work with countries in the West and with partners of the West. So it's not just with liberal democracies. We work in the Middle East and in other parts of the world as well. But that is the kind of cut and the company's ideology.
But you just mentioned human rights. What I'm curious about is that, do you violate human rights by processing all that data?
Not by virtue of no. No is the simple answer to that, in that we act as a data processor. Our job is to provide software that enables our customers to satisfy their obligations, whether that's under data protection law or the various other kind of regulatory frameworks that apply in a given.
But how do you regulate that? Because if you don't know what happens with the data and the software, how do you regulate what happens with the software?
Well, I mean, in the field of data protection alone, you have this regulation called the GDPR that regulates in Europe the way that data is collected, processed, and used, and that is that's a piece of legislation that Europeans are very familiar with. That's just one piece of legislation. In fields like law enforcement, you'll have different legislation relating to criminal procedure, to evidence, and life sciences, other statutes again. So our customers, particularly our customers, are working in these really complex data governance and regulatory environments, and to comply with those requirements, you need software that enables
what intrigues me is that you have been in law school, right?
Correct.
You are a lawyer.
A long time ago,
Yeah,
so give me some flex.
If you
and
use,
in New Zealand.
Yes, exactly. But if you use that sort of knowledge on the strategies and intriguing problematics of today's position of Palantir, what do you see?
Sorry, can you ask the question again?
You have been trained as a lawyer.
Correct.
You used to be a lawyer.
Correct.
What does that mean if you look with that focus towards the position of Palantir's, which is on a regular basis debated on the especially law side of work?
I'd push back on that.
No, please, but
I'd push back on the notion that our legal soundness is challenged. Look, we could never have grown the business we have across Europe, not just in the commercial world, but also in the public sector, if we were anything other than trustworthy, if we were anything other than compliant with local law, with local European law. It goes further than that. It's because of our software that our customers can comply with complex ethical and data governance requirements that would otherwise be beyond them.
Yeah, but what can I... Wait, I want to ask something first. I keep hammering on the lack of transparency, right? Because I just don't really understand it. Because you work with governments, and especially in this case, the Dutch government. We had to find out that the Palantir and the Dutch government were working together through an article. So then if we need to regulate what happens with the data and the way you work together with the Dutch government, how can we know that it needs to be regulated if no one knows it's happening?
So you have to trust your institutions and your elected representatives and your regulators, and you have to subject them to scrutiny, and you have to subject their suppliers to scrutiny in the way that you are now. But again,
do you understand
it's not for a supplier of goods or services to reveal to the public information that their client has said is confidential. And if you were asking any other technology company the same thing, they would say that NDAs are a real thing.
No.
Alan, especially on this point about this legislation and the lack of control, which is impossible as long as it's secretive, what can you advise on this? What has to be done?
Well, what I find interesting here is that we go back to trust and loyalty and these kinds of questions. But in the end, and you're also selling the situation a little bit short, I think, if you just say we're just a software company, but that's maybe me. You're an American company, so it doesn't have to do anything with trust or loyalty. In the end, if Trump decides to step out of NATO and sanction, for example, the Dutch government or people within the Dutch government, then Palantir doesn't have a choice. They have to oblige and then stop doing business with the Dutch government. So but that's the situation, and I know that's difficult for you.
Let him respond. You don't have then a choice.
So there's several layers of hypotheticals.
No.
There.
It's a simple question.
It's not a simple question. There are. Palantir is committed to Europe. We've long been in Europe. Our whole purpose.
No, but you're an American-based company.
And we're one of many American-based companies.
You are an American-based company. That's her point.
Yeah. And we remain committed to Europe. We provide our software in such a way that, if you're a national security agency, you will be thinking about the worst case scenario. For example, what if Trump does order the cables to be cut?
What is then the answer of
Atlantic?
Palantir?
The answers will be different in different places, but one of them, for example, will be on-premises hosting, where a customer basically controls our software and their data in an air-gapped environment. But again, there's several layers of hypothetical. One, will the United States stay in and out of NATO? If it does leave NATO, does that necessarily mean that it's going to impose trade sanctions on the whole of Europe? I mean, if we're talking about that world, then we're in a very dangerous place. And it's not just Palantir you're talking about. It's immense harm to both sides of the transatlantic relationship.
And I think that's actually the point here. So it's not just Palantir, it's Microsoft, and that's why we are too dependent on American technologies, and that's why we need to focus on alternatives so that we don't become dependent, because Palantir is not just a software company, it provides the infrastructure for digital warfare. And that means if we, as the Netherlands, buy or actually rent, because you don't really own it, the software and the infrastructure, and you have to pull out because of trade sanctions, then our military loses its infrastructure and everything. So we need to be able to stand on our own feet and don't be able to just trust people on their, companies on their eyes that they're committed or anything, because we don't need commitments. We need actual institutions and companies that we can trust and the laws that we can trust. And currently we can't do both with the United States.
One response, and then you can ask the question, okay?
So, for sure, I agree, and I think colleagues would agree that Europe needs more agency when it comes to technology. Europe needs to reflect on how it missed the wave of software, it missed the wave of AI, it's now lagging in terms of technology adoption. Europe needs more agency when it comes to tech. The question is, how does it kind of develop that agency? And I think there are real risks with, for example, crudely protectionist approaches in a world where no country is technologically self-sufficient when it comes to technology. If you think of, SAP, German company, will run on AWS infrastructure. ASML underpins GPUs and AI use cases internationally, and so on and so forth. And so the risk is that by taking that kind of crudely protectionist approach, you're trading off capability in a really serious way that will hold back your productivity and your public services at a point when technology is marching ahead and Europe's already lagging. And it's a misallocation of investment. You're spending money replicating what already exists, when I think actually Europe needs to be finding new forms of leverage at other points in the technology stack. Like what would Europe look like if you had 10 ASMLs, all of which were kind of three times larger as a means of leverage in global value chains?
Okay, let's go to the question in the audience.
Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Lauren Gould, and I'm associate professor in the field of conflict studies. So I'd really like to pivot back towards how your and many other corporate entities' software and cloud environments are being used in the context of war. You used the fantastic example of how data sources in medical care are being brought together, analyzed, and used to make people better. But in the context of war, they're being used, this data is being brought together, analyzed, and targets are produced to kill people. And what we're seeing in all contexts of war at this moment in time, and many of them in Gaza, Iran, Lebanon, that they are killing thousands of people, which are not combatants, but civilians. So can you please reflect on how Palantir deals with this ethical and political situation? And
shall we start with this one and then I come back? Yeah, but this is don't let them escape on this one. Okay.
Yeah. I have one even question before then.
Yeah. No, we start with this one.
Yeah.
So we're proud to work with military institutions. We're proud to work with militaries across Europe and in the United States, because we believe that ultimately effective militaries are one of our ultimate safeguards of rights and freedoms at home. We don't resile from or deny the complexity that exists in those spaces, including the deeply regrettable fact that civilian harm is typically a consequence of war. But we don't retreat from those spaces.
Would you call this collateral damage?
Civilian harm is an inevitable feature of warfare. Now, it's very often a consequence of warfare.
Okay, thank you.
Now,
Genocide. It's a genocide.
Okay. Thank you. We've already asked you to stop, please. Sir?
The existence of you is a threat to people in this world, to my children.
Sir, we've asked you to stop 3 times already. I'm going to ask the guard to come here. Could you please stop?
You've killed people in the US.
Otherwise, we're going to ask you, we're going to have to remove you.
You will do the same here. You're gonna kill people here as well. Your existence.
We will go back to the second question here.
On the benefits of the billionaire
Yeah.
class.
Okay.
So I guess
The point is made. Thank you.
I guess my point is that I mean, there's a lot of people that would look at spaces like defence, and not just defence, but defence, law enforcement, other fields, and they would, you know, rather not get involved because these institutions are involved in complex challenges that involve immense harm and immense human suffering. I mean, as a company, that's not what we do, including because technology can play a key role in actually resolving and mediating some of the tensions and challenges that exist in this space. So if you know, again, sorry to mention the website again, but you can read about the engineering work we've done in the space of civilian harm. How can you bring more current no strike list data into a targeting workflow? How can you use satellite imagery and other sources of intelligence to provide a commander with more up-to-date information on the status of a battlefield, on the status of the civilian environment? Often these challenges require technologists and engineers to engage rather than just say, war makes me feel uncomfortable, I'm stepping back.
Okay, response.
Okay, so I'm engaging. I'm there with you in the engineering room. How do you, once you've produced a target based on all the data sources that you've collected, you've engaged the target, what is the feedback loop? Are you going into these civilian infrastructures, identifying those who you've targeted and identifying their identity and being able to formulate whether they are a combatant or non-combatant?
Yeah. So, again, I want to be clear about Palantir's role here. We're a software company. We provide software to institutions, which in this case includes the military. So actually, you know, in the first instance, it's fundamentally the military's responsibility to do those things. But that's not me saying that we disavow our responsibility. We do have agency. We have choice in terms of what technology we build and who we choose to build it with. And so what you'll see is actually our engineers partnering with militaries to design capabilities that make it easier for them to make decisions which aren't just militarily more effective, but which actually respond to the international humanitarian law context and some of the ethical challenges they're dealing with, including around civilian harms and all sorts of other features of the law of armed conflict that have to be built into the platform.
The use of technology, right, that you're describing, there is a large margin of error. So isn't also what she's asking, how do you know that if the information...
It's ridiculous that Balie is giving a platform to these bastards. Palantir is a horrible company.
Okay.
We try to make a conversation, not a one-way ticket.
Stop Palantir. Stop Palantir.
Okay.
Stop
Okay,
Palantir.
thank you. Thank you.
Stop Palantir. Stop Palantir.
I think this was a mistake.
I ask you for the second time to sit down now. Okay. Dankjewel. You're not going to stop, so I will ask you to remove. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Killers, supporters of genocide. We do not discuss with this kind of people.
I'm going to ask you to leave the room.
And make them more likable. This is ridiculous.
Ja, dankjewel.
Stop Palantir. Stop Palantir. Stop Palantir. Fuck you.
Dankjewel. Let's continue. You, I think, have one last question on this topic.
Yeah, I would just... There are a lot of concerns about how technology is used AI-wise, right?
Yeah.
Can we try to get ourselves a little bit together, please? We try to have an organized debate. This is what the Balie is about. We have an exchange of views. We listen. We try to be polite.
And respect
you
each
can make
other.
your point. You can make a question. But please give each other the room. Okay? Thank you so much. Okay, but we are here on the table.
Yeah.
I will be back with you in 4 minutes, okay? I promise. It's okay. Yeah. Okay, Rosalie.
What I wanted to ask about the technology is that we haven't really discussed that. What happens with... I mean, AI is used, right? So we keep saying, like, Shane Harris was here on Monday, and he's a journalist from The Atlantic, and he talked about that he's afraid that the technology that is used is also self-learning. So what if the human aspect is taken out of this process, and we don't have any overview or oversight anymore of how the data is being added and how, if the data is correct enough?
So, even in respect of AI, it's, again, one of the purposes of our platform is to provide transparency into how AI technologies are being used at what points in which decision-making processes. I think we kind of need to decomp the concept of AI a little bit, because there are very different technologies being used in very different ways by different customers in different sectors.
We're talking about consequences.
You're talking about consequences in very abstract terms. When I guess my argument...
Let's make it very plain.
Yeah.
Say if you are an arms factory, you cannot be surprised that people are shot.
If you're in an arms factory...
you cannot be surprised that people are shot.
And?
Well, you are an AI-orientated company which now say, yeah, it has effect on civilians, for example. You cannot be surprised about that.
Again, you're asking me to engage with abstractions that I just can't grasp, because I think we need to discuss the ways in which technology is used and the way in which AI is used to the extent we can in the context of specific situations. So the way a computer vision model works is entirely different to the way a large language model works as an agent. I think, forgive me for not being smart enough, but I don't know how to engage with your abstraction.
It's not an abstraction. It's really about the impact of your technology-driven programs and what that means for real societies.
Yeah, and we're entirely engaged on that. So as I've said, we're not a software company that builds widgets and throws them over a wall. We're opinionated about where we deploy our software and how we deploy it. When we deploy our software, we typically deploy our forward deployed engineers alongside it. My team, the Privacy and Civil Liberties Engineering team, is there to support the company to work in these spaces where, whether it's immigration enforcement or in healthcare, financial services, across the commercial sector as well, technology is not neutral. It has implications, and so it needs to be deployed. It needs to be deployed mindfully. I fully agree with that. If that's where you were going.
Yeah, and who's the mind then?
Who's the minder? Primarily, it's the public institutions we serve. But as I've said, we as a software company have agency and control over what we build and how we build it. And so there's a partnership there between technologists and public institutions.
Yeah.
I suggest I give the gentleman the possibility to ask a question, and then we will ask our panelists to join the table.
Yeah,
okay?
Let's keep it short. Then we can go to the second panel.
Even kijken, waar zat u? Ja, ik kom bij u. Mag ik heel even tussendoor? Please introduce yourself. I keep the mic.
All right. So my name is Jethro. I'm a principal architect in cybersecurity. My question is, since I think, I may presume that most of us did vote in multiple elections in our country, that we voted for a government that apparently also decided to be a customer of this company. So why, as you guys that organized the interview, why did you not invite government representatives that also could counterbalance this discussion? Because it looks like a bashing of a company, which I totally understand because it's a very, tricky thing. But the counterbalance in this discussion is completely missing, to be honest.
Well, it's a very good question. And Rosalie? Rosalie, you have the answer. Yeah.
I think there are two things I want to address. Firstly, this was not the bashing of a company. Was not our intention. We're mostly asking. We're mostly curious, and I don't think it was our intention to bash. Secondly, we did invite the government, but they didn't come.
So that's the answer.
And if I can respond, I think many of us kind of want to believe the mythology of the surveillance supervillain, when I guess my plea is to think of us more as a software company with really good data governance tooling. Again, that's not minimizing, as I've said a million times, the responsibility and agency we have, but try and focus on the facts as well.
Dat is niet afgesproken, zou ik niet doen.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
We're going to give you a little break.
Yep.
Or
no, you can better stay on the table if that's possible.
Or if you want to stay, you can, but
yeah,
you can also take a break.
Okay. We will continue our panelist conversation. It was, of course, a very good question of the gentleman over there. Where is the government on the table? Well, the seat is empty, as you can see. They have been invited. The answer was no. Ellen, what does that tell us if you see that the government itself does not want to be accountable for that sort of a decision?
I think it's frankly quite shocking because in the end we live in a democracy and you can debate whether we want this technology, we need this technology, if we want to use it in what terms and in what kind of way. But in the end it's a democracy and we should talk about this. And I think that in this case our government's also hiding behind secrecy, behind the fact that most of the work they do with Palantir, or basically all the work they do with Palantir, is a state secret. And I think we as a country should be open to this discussion because some of the services Palantir delivers is something that, for example, the intelligence service really need. The question is, do they need it from Palantir? And I think we need to have a discussion about what do we want, how do we want it, and our government should be part of that.
And how did you listen to the answer of Palantir saying, listen, you should not develop 10 different Palantirs, it's not worth that sort of investment, you should team up?
Well, I'm an engineer from background. I know basically nothing about economics, but I've been in 1 or 2 lessons, and I think day one, lesson 1 is monopolies are bad for everyone, for the economy, for innovation, for everything. So I think, like, apart from ethics and morals and all the discussions we can have today, it's also just bad economics to be dependent from one player, especially being dependent from one player that doesn't, that's not even, you know, that's an American company, with my question before. So, of course, it's in their best interest to be the only one, but it's in the people's and the country's best interest to actually have a choice and let companies fight with each other for who's the best, and not the best in killing, but the best in protecting people.
Okay, thank you. Jochem, how have you listened to this conversation?
I mean, it's fascinating, and I was expecting all of this to go out of hand, but it happened quite quickly. It escalated quickly. But there's a lot of energy, obviously, towards this topic, and I think it's fully justified that there is so much emotion in this room. But I also am intrigued by the fact that there's a lot of focus on the company as such, that I also do not think is a very, let's say, balanced company in that sense. But I do think what it lays bare is our lack of capacity in Europe. And in this world, it's all about geopolitical power, and we lack power in so many domains: in military, technology, economically, all kinds of other things, right? So the fact that many of our government services, defense, police, are using this technology is because there is obviously a lack of something that they would love to buy, alternative, at least not on the same level that they want to use. The fact that they're not represented here, indeed, is very sad, but I think it is also representative of the fact there's a lot of discomfort in the fact that trying to protect ourselves as Europe, which we must do ourselves in due course, is best done currently mostly with non-European technology. That's how people that use this technology, government, police forces, but also large corporates, they think we need the best technology to innovate, to be productive, to protect our economies. And still, it is only a very small share of European providers that can cater to those needs, right? So if you look at the lack of capacity that we have in Europe, I think this is a very painful example of how that is playing out in practice. But it's also a very, very strong call for us to, as Europe, as the Netherlands, ask for more alternatives. And I think that, you know,
but that also means more money.
It means many things. It means more money. It means more cooperation across the European continent. Under the first Trump administration, until 2020, we saw discomfort, but also, let's say, the benefit of the doubt that this will go away. The Biden administration came back in. Everybody kind of back in their seats. The second Trump administration, I think, is the Rubicon crossed, right? We have seen, especially over the Greenland crisis that happened in January of this year, that there's no way back and that there's a lot of impetus for us as Europe to really develop alternatives. At the same time, it's going to be a long road ahead. We don't think we can, be disconnected.
What is the long road? 10 years, 20 years, 30 years?
I think on some parts it's going to be quite short. I think there are good alternatives already in terms of cloud and other technologies that could be adopted quite quickly. But you also need market share to grow. And what we see there is there's also a disconnect between European countries that want to work across borders and really set up something as a European alternative.
So you mean France, for instance?
For example, I mean, the links between the Élysée, the palace of the president, right, and the French company is very short, which means making sure that French companies thrive over other European countries is a dynamic dynamic that we've seen for a long time. I think it might be different now. We see a lot of cooperation between Germany and France that also the Netherlands is looking towards. So things might change, but in other technology, we are quite behind, right? And do we really think we're going to be able to be completely independent in a couple of years' time? I doubt it.
Okay. Ellen, you wanted to react?
Yes, I disagree with you on a couple of things, but mainly on the fact that the European technology isn't there. Because, well, my company in the basis helps governments and other companies to buy European tech, because our analysis is that the tech is actually there mostly, but that we have actually difficulty in finding it. And if you look at Europe, and I think if we look at the Netherlands, we don't have a tech problem, we have a government procurement problem. If we go back a little bit to Palantir, they have over $1 billion contract with 75 American governmental organizations in it. So they have one contract and 75 government organizations can use it without having to procure anything else. So the Netherlands, it's a very different thing. You need a contract for every step on the road. So for example, if a data company we know quite well that can deliver actually a lot of the services Palantir does, if they want to work with the general intelligence services, so the IVD, they need a contract. If they want to work with the military intelligence services, providing the same service, they need a contract. And
so they don't work with one government, they work with the several departments of the government.
In the Netherlands, they have to work with almost 20 governments, while in America, of in the United States, one government and all can procure for multiple agencies. And in the Netherlands, we don't do that. And now our Ministry of Economic Affairs is actually trying to find out if they can start a pilot to see if they can combine two contracts of two different governmental organizations. And that's our main problem, not our technology.
No. Market logics.
I think on the one hand, for the public sector specifically, vital infrastructure, critical infrastructure, there's a lot of political decisions to be made to say, hey, we want to have European or Dutch companies only or first. It's a completely legitimate question. And if a political majority decides we want this and they translate it into procurement that actually leads to more uptake and a growth of European cloud and AI sectors, I think that's a really good thing to do. It's indispensable, in fact, to do. But if you look honestly at the digital ecosystem, especially on the commercial side of large corporates, but also Dutch startups and scale-ups, they are not prone to say, hey, we're going to go for a European alternative because it's the best, right? The market has to grow, and if a commercial market says we are going for that product, notwithstanding, where it's from, if it's Dutch and it's better, we're going to go for it. That's the free market. It's also a political decision to say, do we want to stimulate our local industry, not only with procurement, but also with money, with other things, like they do in Southern Europe? It's a culture that has to change as well.
Okay. Whether it's being a market problem or the fact that it's simply not yet developed, what does it mean in the meantime? Do we have to work with Palantir?
Of course not. Oh, sorry, of course not. The thing is, then the investment in our own companies is going to be double as expensive because the investment money is already paid to Palantir. So if we want the services of Palantir, and I think some of the services are actually quite helpful, then our government needs to say these are the type of services that we want. And if they actually put in the procurement question, the amount of money they are now willing to spend to Palantir, then I know multiple Dutch and European companies
who can compete upon
easily.
Yeah, but
the thing is, it's multiple, not one, and they need the trust. And that's a big thing that our government currently doesn't give to our own tech companies. While they trust a company, I think most of us agree to we cannot trust.
But it's also ease, right? I mean, isn't the government also a little bit lazy, if I might say? Because, I mean, look at DigiD and Solvinity. I mean, that was a huge issue.
It's ease, but it's also power politics, let's be honest, right? We're part of NATO as the Netherlands, many other European nations. The United States uses Palantir for a lot of defense stuff. If NATO says and forces its smaller NATO allies to use Palantir as well, so it's easy to interoperate,
because NATO can do that.
Well, the US can do that within the NATO partnership and force its smaller partners to use it as well, right? It's power politics.
Power politics on one hand, the lack of economical trust in local companies and therefore not the investment needed, which a government can decide to do, laziness maybe to a certain point. All this brings us, of course, still to the question, who is going to protect us in the meantime?
Well, I hope still NATO, but NATO doesn't need to stand or fall on the question if we procure Palantir, I think. And if it does, then, well, we have a bigger problem than we even have now.
And do we?
I think we do, yeah. And the problem is really, really urgent. I mean, Trump is threatening to blow up NATO every other day. We've had a lot of people here being very vocal about the genocide in Palestine, and they have a point. The thing is, we are so dependent on the United States for our military technology, for our civil technology, for energy, that our government currently has a very difficult decision to make. So I can say that our intelligence services, the people who are responsible for protecting us from terrorist attacks, for example, they use a lot of Israeli and American technology. So if we don't do what Trump wants us to do mainly, then we do have a risk of not being able to use that technology. And then our government or our policymakers or decision makers need to balance the question, values versus our own people's lives in the short term. And I think that is the real question of why we need to buy European tech as fast and as much as we can.
We're fucked anyway, Jochem.
Well, we're fucked in the short term, I would say. Yeah. No, I mean, we've been depending on a apparently forever lasting partnership, allyship with the United States. For 80 years it lasted, and suddenly it stopped, right? Almost overnight. If you think about all these dependencies that you mentioned, it is only realistic to say, indeed, you must work as hard and fast as possible as you can to become disconnected in all these different levels, but also accept that there's going to be a transfer phase that's going to be very uncomfortable. And you're going to have to also, be able to take the pain in terms of, for example, if you say for certain types of applications, we're going to have to go for smaller companies that are still small, right? And that need to learn to interconnect. Do you mean
startups, or?
No, I mean that many of these larger companies have ecosystems that have been built out for decades, and people are getting used to it, have gotten used to it. Other companies still need to integrate first. There has to be a certain level of accustomment to it. And that means it's going to take time for people to get used to that. It's also going to cost maybe more money initially, because these companies need to build up skill to be able to provide a product that is also up to a functionality level that people will be willing to pay an extra price for or not. This is all a dynamic that's playing out. It's a messy dynamic, and it's going to take a couple of years before we can really add large share of European alternatives. But the government, I agree with Ellen on this, has a important role to play to motivate the development of this, to buy it ourselves. And then we've seen in France and Germany that big companies there say, hey, why don't you buy at least 30% European technology by the government so as to stimulate more investment. There's also a level of investment is very low still. I mean, investors in Europe are very skeptical.
But that's a promise of the government, right? They are setting up an InvestNL fund where they're going to try to invest more in startups and especially scale-ups.
That's a bit of a problem in the Netherlands specifically, right? If you look at some other countries around Europe, they have really said, okay, we're going to set up massive amounts of funding. In Germany, for example, hundreds of billions of euros there. The government here says, hey, okay, we have a lot of ambition in digital autonomy, but we're not going to really also add a lot of cash to it.
Not putting the money next to the mouth.
Exactly. Right. Not as much as our surrounding countries, unfortunately.
But have we reached that point now where we're going to do that? Because I feel that, I mean, I've been making this series for 3.5 years, and every single time the conclusion is, we need to invest more. It's going to be the time. The politicians need to see that this is the tipping point. But I mean, sometimes it feels like in another 3.5 years, we'll be having the same conclusion. What will drive people or the companies, politicians, us to say, now is the time?
You see, Europe is the strongest in times of crises, right? It was very strong during the migration crisis. It was strong during the COVID crisis. It was strong during the energy crisis on the back end of the Ukraine war. And overnight, many things that were thought impossible changed very quickly. When we got off Russian gas within a year and a half, which is crazy fast if you think about it. The technology crisis, in terms of our dependencies, is a crisis that is now on steroids based on Trump doing what he does and his government. But it's also a bit of a crisis in slow motion, right? So to what extent can Europe hold tight to creating initiatives in terms of investment, in terms of buying, in terms of development, that can hold on to this and be the best as it can in crisis mode?
Yeah.
Richard, in a way, you have to prepare yourself for leaving customers.
On the contrary, European business has continued to grow. It's grown steadily for as long as I've been in the company.
So you don't see it?
That growth is accelerating.
You don't see it? You don't see that Europe is doing their own thing?
No, because I think the institutions, so certainly, I don't think I can speak as a European. I'm a British New Zealander, but nonetheless, if I was European, I'd agree with you that Europe needs more clout. It needs more strategic leverage in tech. It's not good how it's found itself in that situation. I guess my argument that I don't think it will build that leverage through autarky. I think it will build that leverage by building on what's already proven, on developing comparative advantage at levels of the tech stack that take advantage of what's already available. I think the answers here lie less in kind of crudely protectionistic measures and more in kind of boring financial and policy plumbing, like the Capital Markets Union, like the 28th regime, like the digital single market. I think that's the hard, boring work that will start to hopefully bring some life to the European tech sector.
Ellen?
Two things, I think. First is that it's funny that you keep going back to that we don't need to become more protectionist because as I said, I know a lot of European companies because that's my work. And if they want to work into the American security service or security industry, then the American government actually don't want to work with them because they
are
buy
very
their
protective.
own. So the funny thing here I always find is that Chinese and American companies are always the first to point out that we are protectionist the moment we want to buy something European, but they don't buy anything European themselves. So it's not about being protectionist, it's about being sensitive with taxpayers' money.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm not familiar with the details on that. I do know that if you're in the Department of War, you'll see a hell of a lot of SAP. I think that the barriers to entry in the United States aren't necessarily always kind of legal restrictions on foreign software. Often it will just be about the sheer complexity of getting people with the right security clearances, getting onto the right networks, getting access to the right data. So to draw an analogy, you have kind of non-tariff barriers. One of the things that Palantir is doing a lot of work on is getting European tech companies and British tech companies into the US, because if they're working on Palantir, for example, in the UK, they can deploy onto the same infrastructure in the United States. That opens up the American industry for European tech, and is something we're seeing through the Maven Smart system, which NATO's now adopted.
But is that as your partner? Do they become part of Palantir then, or are they a sister company? How does that work?
It's as if they were, they'd deploy on Palantir in a similar way in which they'd deploy on a local hyperscale cloud provider, register the platform.
Okay, response?
On the one hand, indeed, creating a European market dynamic is up to very boring tasks, but it's also about European unity and about trying to make sure that you step beyond your own shadow. So, as an example, the Dutch government has been very wary of digital regulation for decades, right? Especially compared to other countries in Europe. And it was led the way in trying to push back on regulating and also promoting own technology. And only very recently have they decided to actually pivot and say, no, we're going to work towards more European unity and try to see how we can promote this sector. But when it comes to the uptake of non-European technology in the Netherlands, it was active policy for the Dutch government to do this, to import them, to invite them to go and install their own data centers and infrastructure here, right? Because we wanted to be a digital focus point for Europe. And in that sense, economically, it's really helped us as well. But the paradox is it's also made us very dependent, right? And that paradox is now playing out in very uncomfortable positioning in Europe. The Netherlands really has to pivot. This new government is very Europe-focused, so I think there will be a lot of progress done. But there are different ministries in The Hague with different looks on life that are still competing a lot in this domain as well. It's not helping us to be working in unison.
In the meantime, I will go into the audience to open up for questions.
I first want to, Richard, do you want to react to that?
I start here on my work.
No, I think it's an interesting point, but nothing further to say.
Okay, first you. Please introduce yourself.
My name is Tobias, and my question is specifically about the agency that you do have. Like, I understand that you work for government, so they're the end customer. They call the shots, they maybe decide to take an action in a war or something. But you're still the developer, and a lot of the stuff that you're doing is cutting-edge technology, so there are no laws about it. So how do you deal with that, and how do you decide whether to build something or not?
Yeah, I myself personally am not a developer. If I were, I'd be paid a lot more. Fundamentally, we're focused on solving our customers' problems, and so the technology roadmap is guided by that, basically. But we're a commercial software company. That means that across the fleet, the vast bulk of the code is the same. So the core platform, integrating data, securing data, modeling it through the ontology, surfacing that for different apps and AI agentic workflows on the top. It's the same fundamental software product across the board, whether it's in a healthcare context, a manufacturing context, a bank, a military or otherwise. So that's the overall kind of product ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. So you don't care about the end use of your, let's say you build an AI tool, you're going to use agents now, and you say, okay, whether it's a hospital using this or the Department of War, it's all the same platform.
I mean, the fundamental software is the same, and then we deploy what we call forward deployed engineers or FDEs alongside the software to configure the software for the customers.
Mm. Okay, answer is yes. Okay, question.
Hi, I have a little bit of a personal question to Richard. Hi. We have a bit of a similar background: privacy law, human rights law. I ended up in a very different place. I do platform regulation for the Dutch government. I wonder, with the reputation that Palantir has, how can you study civil liberties, human rights, privacy? Like, where is the line for you? Like, all these controversies.
Yeah, where's the line?
Where's the line?
So, unless you're arguing, I guess to put the question back to you.
No. Try to answer the question.
Yeah, I think we believe that we actively seek to work for public institutions that are operating in spaces where human rights might be in tension with each other, might be in tension with societal imperatives. And actually, if you're a civil servant, if you've worked in the Dutch government, you know what it's like to be in a position where you are not the kind of good guy, the good person that you might have thought you were going to be when you entered government to work in government. If you're an immigration officer, you're dealing with a situation where society expects you to enforce immigration law, but the human rights of the immigrants who are being removed also matter. If you're in law enforcement, the victims of crimes have right, the offenders of crimes have right. So, you could take the view that law enforcement is uncomfortable, defense is uncomfortable, but, retreat from these agencies, retreat from these institutions is not an ethically neutral position. We as a company believe that it's important to equip these people with technology that allows them to do their fulfill their missions more effectively and more responsibly. That's the fundamental difference of opinion here, I think.
Okay. Response from Ellen?
Yes, I would like to respond to this because you've made this statement a couple of times today that it's either you work in this field or you're uncomfortable and you put your back to it. I've worked in this field. Mm-hmm. I've worked in intelligence and national security. And so it's not the uncomfortable of working in it or not. The discomfort is in the fact how your company operates. And So
I think you need to...
you don't have to say it's either you do it or you're uncomfortable with it. I think most people are comfortable with the fact that we do have a Ministry of Defense and we do have an army and we do have intelligence services. But
so why would you not want them to have the best technology available?
I want them to have the best ethical technology available, and I want them to have the best technology available and the best accountability available. And I don't want my government to outsource accountability to companies like yours.
Okay, dankjewel. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, okay, so my name is Riemer. And I got really triggered on the capability providing that you do as a company, and also the discussion on whether or not our government should be capable in certain areas.
So your question is?
The question is also the discussion part. The cliche is give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, and teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So we need a government that is able to fish in the areas of war. Can your company in some way provide services that make the government capable of doing the work you now do as a platform? So maybe instead of renting the software, sell it and make the government capable of...
They don't have an interest to do so.
Well, in some ways we do, in the sense that we're not a consultancy firm, we're a software company. So our business model is quite different to an Accenture or a PwC, which in some ways is incentivized to keep the client, buying their consultancy services on an ongoing basis. We make money through licensing software. That means it's in our interests to ensure that the product is what's earning the revenue and not the consultancy hours. So, over time, our customers do become more empowered and more self-sufficient in how they use the software. And with our software in place, they can do more with data on top of that stack. So, I think that's how I'd try and answer your question.
Okay, thank you. I'm over here with the mic. Sorry. Oh, you are?
Max.
Okay, what's the question, Max?
Hi. I have a question. If I would be a prospective customer of Palantir, how do I protect myself from the US FISA and Cloud Act, specifically Section 207?
Yeah. So I think it's important that you understand the business model. So I've said this a few times, and forgive me if this sounds trite, but when a customer puts their data in Palantir's software, they're not giving their data to us. We don't have any legal rights or ownership or claim in respect of that data. So legally, it's not ours to give, which makes it practically difficult, if not impossible, for us to reply, to respond to one of those statutory requests. And then on the technical side of things, our engineers and our people don't technically have access to the data in order to be able to hand it over. So let's say Balie was a customer of Palantir's. Let's say the FBI had reason to believe that Balie was involved in serious criminal offending, or rather that Balie was hosting some kind of drug smuggling gang. For a start, the Department of Justice would go to Balie. They wouldn't go to their software provider. If they did come to us, we'd say, it's not our data to give, and also we can't access the data to give it to you. We would say, Department of Justice or FBI, talk to Balie. So,
Ellen wants to comment on that.
I don't think that's true.
So I think.
So maybe technically you can design your software in a way that you really don't have access to it. Like Signal uses end-to-end encryption. You know your stuff better than I do because it's not open source, so I cannot check. But so if you technically don't have access to the data, then you're right, but if you do, then the Cloud Act actually applies, and if the government comes to us and asks my data from you, then you have to give it.
So in order to practically respond to one of these requests, you have to have custody of the information stored. I think there's a bit of scaremongering around the Cloud Act generally, in the sense that if a Dutch organisation believes that a company has information about serious criminal offending, it can go to court, it can get a subpoena to get access to that information. The Cloud Act is the same, but in a context where you have digital data. Palantir's never been subject to a Cloud Act request. If we had, we would challenge it on all available grounds, because Cloud Act requests shouldn't be made of the data processor. They should be made of the entity that substantively holds the data. But I appreciate this might be getting a little bit wonky.
Okay. Another question over here. We have already heard you, but please.
Okay, question. It's really interesting because you've all got a tech background. You're all kind of in the same industry, and you seem to kind of we're moving to the question of we're not using Palantir, then we should be using other people's tech in a similar way. So I want to go back to the fundamental question of, I think many of the activists in this room, what is Palantir allowing governments to do, both in warfare and policing? And are we as civilians happy with that development? And do we want alternatives to Palantir? Or do we actually want to question what are the systems and infrastructures Palantir and Google and Microsoft and Amazon are building at this moment, and what does that mean for our future security? Because at this moment, it seemingly is that software by Palantir and others are being used in the war in Ukraine, 2 million dead. We have a genocide in Gaza. We have the most, the most amount of targets in the shortest amount of time we've seen in Iran in recent history. So whose security are we talking about when we're saying these systems are being used in a responsible and effective way? And do we want alternative systems, or
Who is your question for?
For all three, really.
Maybe go to Jochem first.
So, I mean, the geopolitical situation in the world has changed very quickly. And it's obviously up to countries themselves to defend themselves according to their own laws and regulations, their international obligations. There's a lot of technology out there that might be able to protect you or have your law enforcement tasks be done quicker or better. But it's always up to the government itself to decide, is this in line with my obligations, and to do the due diligence in that regard. So if you look at it from that perspective, we should not use tech for tech's sake, right? And that is what is still happening a lot. You see a lot of adoption of technology simply because it's out there, it is nice and shiny, and it might allow for defense and government organizations like the police to say, hey, we need this stuff, otherwise we cannot, use it. We cannot do our tasks in a responsible way. I think what we're currently seeing is this function creep of technology is getting out of hand, right? And there's a lot of awareness in the community, like you lead the academic community. There's a lot of NGOs, there's activists, there are a lot of different think tanks that are thinking about this stuff. But there's also a dynamic, right, within governments themselves and between governments and allies together. And there's only so much every single actor can do. But they can take their own responsibility if they're willing to. And I think that the ideology of a company like Palantir is very much driven towards seeing the world in good and bad. I mean, this literally is what this book is all about, written by the CEO. Other companies say we subject ourselves to processes that are controlled, for example, by the human rights business principles and others. So it is also a task of a company to say, to what extent do we want to work with our technology, and should we actually provide it, and should we release it, for example, in the market before we test it towards our own boundaries.
Also Marietje Schake's point, right? Do you want to react, Richard? To either Jochem or the question.
Yeah, I mean, to answer, to answer the question of, okay, what do we do? I mean, it's helping the NHS deliver more operations, diagnose cancer faster, discharge people from hospital quicker. Worth keeping in mind something that's been lost in this conversation. Roughly half of our revenue is commercial. So our commercial business in Europe is much larger, I think, than our government one. Don't quote me on that. So, I think we're focused a lot about kind of a particular part of our public sector business. But
that's the other 50%. I have another question over here.
Oh, wait, I think Ellen wants to answer the question as well.
Okay, but let's speed up a little bit, because there are still a lot of people who want to ask questions.
I think this is the question of questions. Do we want this technology? And as being part of the intelligence service, some of these technologies I think are very valuable, others are detestable. And we are a democratic country, so we need to be able to have this discussion. And we talk about our government and about Europe in a very abstract sense, but we are our country. So we need to have elected officials in our government that understand this technology so that we can actually have a debate about it. And if you want to do anything apart from, if you want to do anything, first vote on digital candidates, people who actually understand this technology so that we can have a debate about it. And since voting is hopefully not going to happen for a while with our parliament currently, email the people who are currently in parliament. Two of the people I know very well in the D66 part of a group of parliaments currently, they already ask questions to our government on Palantir. Send them emails. The D66, I don't care who you send an email to, find their email addresses, send them emails about the fact that you are worried about this, because that fuels the discussion. That's what we need. We need discussions if we want this, what we want, how we want it.
Question over here. Who are you?
Yes, my name is Leon. I want to frame this question by thanking the Balie for bringing together these sort of opposing viewpoints and hosting a respectful discussion between them. That brings me to my question. It's actually to all three, to Richard, Ellen, and Jochem. So, Richard, what is the most surprising thing you didn't know 2 hours ago that you learned from Ellen and Jochem? And then to both Ellen and Jochem, what is the most surprising thing you learned in the last 2 hours from Richard? And I'm sorry.
Well, let's start with Richard then.
The most surprising thing. If I'm going to be completely honest, it was a difficult conversation to follow, and my notes weren't as good as they should be, and nothing comes to mind right now. I'm sorry.
Jochem?
Well, the fact that the salary of a lobbyist at Palantir is much lower than an engineer's. Is it surprising? Maybe not, but I think it warrants maybe a pay raise because you're having a really rough time.
As you can probably tell, I'm not a lobbyist. If I was a professional lobbyist, I'd be doing a much better job here.
Ellen?
Well, I think if I would meet you in a bar and I didn't know you worked for Palantir, we could actually have a drink and have a nice evening. So I really hoped that you would be like this evil person, because that's who I want to have, have the face of Palantir. So apparently also kind of nice people work there, which is, I hoped not to see.
Yeah. Let's keep it like that. Okay, we have a question over here. That's correct.
I think, Leonard, I think this is the last question.
We tried to make it the last question, so it better is a very interesting one. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Bert. I hope it's an interesting question. You talked about not getting hot or cold on the policy of the day, which I found a problematic way of reasoning. Because do you really say that, okay, so you worked Palantir worked for the Obama administration, then Trump won, then Biden, then Trump again, that you have no moral responsibility whatsoever, whatever request you get now. So if things go wrong in the United States, you will comply no matter what.
Thank you, point made.
We have moral responsibility, but what we don't have is a democratic mandate. We're not a company that's taking positions to the public that's being tested at the ballot box. And so for that reason, I'm wary about the notion of software companies and technology companies giving public sector institutions with a democratic mandate the thumbs up or thumbs down on an administration by administration basis or on a case by case basis. I think that way lies something that's pretty anti-democratic and concerning.
Okay.
Rosalie, I think we have had quite a heated debate tonight. Yeah. We have had an open talk, but also a lot of questions and remarks in regards to the worries. We have also learned that it's really time to step up as a European front to make a difference. And also we've learned that's really something which we should our own governments accountable for. There are possibilities, there are necessities, there is even a possibility of working and teaming up with companies like Palantir, as long as you do it under the regulations of your own government, under your own citizens' positions. I think for the most important thing is that we have had this conversation here in the open, in a democratic institute, and that it was possible to exchange those views. Remember that there are a lot of countries around us where this is not possible at all. So please cherish the fact that we have the possibility to exchange views, to be different in views, to be not always very on the same page. But I really want to underline how important it is that we do this. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being also very informative and having the questions organized and asked as you did.
Also, thank you to the technicians and the rest of the organization, as well as the speakers and Palantir for coming here. Good night.
Thank you so much. Good night. Welkom, dankjewel.